Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to We Ain't Got No Histories Facebook Live special midweek Conte Morata preseason tour. Forgot to mute the tab edition, as always. We weren't going to do another one of these until the weekend, possibly after the Arsenal game, or maybe even later, but the last 48 hours have been full of excitement and amazing developments, really. So, figured we do a quick, we'll see how it goes, how long it goes. Do a quick little chat over here, and sum up the events of the last 48 hours as Chelsea flew off to China to begin the preseason tour with 3 games coming up against Arsenal, Bayern Munich, and Inter Milan. And then about 6 hours later, confirmed a new contract for Antonio Conte. And then about 12 hours later, confirmed a transfer agreement with Real Madrid for the transfer of Álvaro Morata, who's going to be, presumably, our first choice striker heading into next season, as Morata himself urged a little caution since he's been to this position almost already once this summer with Manchester United, and then for whatever reason all that fell through for him. So there was even one report where he supposedly, I haven't really seen confirmation of this, but he supposedly dyed his hair red in anticipation of the transfer to Manchester United. And unfortunately for him, that didn't come through. Fortunately for us, it did come through. For the player, we've been told for over a year now, by accepted consensus, really, that he was Antonio Conte's first choice as Chelsea striker. Presumably, a lot of that had to do with basically last summer Diego Costa telling Conte about 2 days into his new job that he wanted to leave, that the transfer didn't come through for Costa to Atletico that summer, and he had to go back to Conte with his tail tucked between his legs. So that was, that relationship didn't really get off to a good start, but they made it work for a season, and then obviously Conte basically broke up with him over text, which is always a nice way to go. Of course, there was the whole confusion between Lukaku and Morata. For much of the season, we were told that Conte wanted Morata and the Chelsea board wanted Lukaku. It would appear that for whatever reason, through twists and turns and other fancy developments, it will indeed be Conte who wins this battle, I guess you could call it, maybe a battle. He got his choice in the end, although, of course, some people now claim that it was Lukaku who was his choice. But, who really knows? I think we can go with the long-term narrative that Conte really wanted Morata. As we know, he signed him back in 2013, was it? Yeah, 2014 with Juventus, just before leaving Juventus, so hopefully that doesn't happen again, that history doesn't repeat itself. But 2 years later, they finally will be able to work together. Morata himself has said lots of nice things about Conte already. Back in April, he said Conte placed tremendous faith in him for signing him for Juventus, and that he was sure that one day they will work together. At the time, that was, possibly seen as tabloid fodder for, further rumors, but now it turns out to be a pretty accurate statement for the upcoming future here. So Morata his transfer fee is at least 58 million, is the initial fee, as Matt Law has reported. From the Telegraph, 58 million pounds. The BBC were going with 60 million pounds, so that's pretty negligible difference there. Plus, of course, plenty of add-ons. Chelsea like to, as most buying clubs, will advertise the lower fee to make it look like they got a really good deal. And in today's market, certainly we could call 58 million a bargain for a first-choice striker, when the likes of Lukaku are going for 75 and Belotti has a 100 million euro buyout and stuff like that. There are reports in Spain, of course, that claim that the price is actually 70 million pounds plus a little bit of add-ons. But if we average all that out, we can probably assume the final price will be around 70 million with wages to match. But in the end, it's not your money, it's not my money. What is important is that we have a center forward to replace Loic Remy. To replace Diego Costa, who may now continue to party it up in Brazil in his Atletico shirt. It's unclear if and when we will ever sell him this summer, but assuming at some point we will. The latest is the figure I saw that Chelsea were gunning for now is 44 million pounds. It's unclear how we ever imagine Atletico will pay this, when they have been pretty adamant all along that they can only pay 26 million. So I am not sure where they're going to come up with the extra 18 to make that work. But that's where we are. We have about 6 weeks to sell Costa before the transfer window closes. And since he can't play till January, I don't think it really matters when we sell him, as long as we sell him before the end of August. So that's the big news on Morata, and that's tremendous news. He is currently flying to London. Some eagle-eyed Redditors, as they always do, picked out the flight from Los Angeles to London that left around 4 p.m. local time and will be landing... As if that's creepy enough for you, will be landing around 10 a.m. London time, which is in about 30 minutes. So, if you're around Heathrow, you can still jump on the tube or in your car and go there for the greeting party. Hold up a big sign. So that should be happening soon. Presumably, he's then going to go to Cobham and take his medical, for which he said he had been preparing for the last couple of days, so he possibly had an inkling of what was going to happen. Of course, for us, this all happened within about 6 hours from the first rumors dropping from Italy. I think it was Di Marzio and Romano, the usual suspects we listened to out of Italy, who were forced to say it. That doesn't really matter. Within about 6 hours, it went from a vague rumor to, holy crap, we actually signed a striker and we didn't have to pay 9 figures for it. So that's nice. Presumably after his medical's done, he will then head over to China and meet up with the rest of the squad. Where is he currently? Asked Richard. He should be on a plane still right now from LAX, Los Angeles International, to London. I'm assuming Heathrow, although Chelsea flew out of Stansted, but it looked like Morata was on a regularly scheduled British Airways flight based on his ticket. There's a video going around. I think we have it up on the site, and of course you can find it in a whole bunch of other places around the net. There is a video of him not only saying goodbye to his teammates at Real Madrid, and that's an official Real Madrid video. So presumably it's, we can assume it's happening if the official Real Madrid channel filmed him saying goodbye to all his teammates. And then there are some intrepid people who went out to LAX to find him there as he was checking in and going through security. And we also saw a reporter for AS talking to him, and those quotes are now in print as well and up on the site. Some, really nice quotes. He's obviously looking forward to finally playing with Conte, and he knows several players on the team already thanks to the Spanish national team. He said he's already talked to Azpilicueta. He obviously knows Fabregas and Pedro, and he apparently also talked to Fernando Torres. probably not about how to score goals, but about life in London. I don't know, something like that. Torres apparently told him that, if he needs any help, he's there. I don't know, I guess how to get to Nando's or something like that. Can't wait to see him in blue. That's right. So hopefully, I would assume Saturday's game against Arsenal will be a little too soon. He might show up just to be on the bench or in the team. If he's in London right now, in about 30 minutes, say a day to take all his medicals, get signed, film the stupid video that I'm sure we'll get again, and do all the announcement, do all the pictures, etc., and then he can fly out, say tomorrow, because there's really no reason for him to be hanging around in London. So I'm talking about transfers, talk about the legend Fellaini. What did Fellaini do? Why would I be talking about Fellaini? Oh, wait to elaborate from Juan Garcia on that one. Anyway, so if he flies out Friday, he might just barely make it in time for the game, which was 12:25, so right around noon, London time, against Arsenal in Beijing. So that should be exciting. Any update on Danilo and Sandro? So lost a little bit among the Morata thing is that apparently we got maybe not gazumped, but certainly beaten out for Danilo for whatever reason. That's the latest anyway. Supposedly he's heading to Manchester City, which really makes no sense either for him or for Manchester City, considering they just spent 50 million on Kyle Walker, and Danilo is not a left back. I guess he can play there, but so can Azpilicueta. Doesn't make him a left wing back. Really, to be clear, Azpilicueta is a good left back. He's not a good left wing back. So I don't know why Danilo would ever want to go to Manchester City, but apparently that's what he's doing. And there's. Do you think Danilo was expected to start ahead of Moses? Well, I think he certainly has a better chance of playing ahead of Moses, or at least rotating with him, than he does with £50 million Kyle Walker. Not that I would really super highly rate Kyle Walker. It's just that when you spend that much money on a player, you kind of have some pressure to play him. He's he's the most expensive defender of all time, if you want to call him a defender, or at least equal with David Luiz when we sold him to PSG. So that's Danilo. I guess we possibly aren't getting Danilo. I don't think it's necessarily a tragedy. There are several people whom I talked to who've watched Danilo much more than I have, who are not exactly sold on him as a player, certainly not at 30 million euros, which what Real Madrid want out of him. So the trouble is, there's not really any other players we've been really linked with. We were very, very, very briefly linked with Jeremy Toljan of Hoffenheim. And I think, just as before, he would be a pretty astute sighting, and maybe we'll get somebody a little cheaper, somebody a little more under the radar to bolster that side of the pitch. So we still don't really have an obvious backup to Moses. Possibly on the left with Alonso, and I don't know, maybe we'll make Kennedy into an amazing left wing back at some point. But we don't even have somebody like Kennedy on the right side for Moses. So that's probably, I'd say, if I were a guessing man, I'd say that's our next priority. Now that we have a striker, now that we have a midfielder and a center back, I would say right wing back should be the next priority, is the word I was looking for. As left wing back, Alonso, Alexandro, I suppose, is still the same as before, where Chelsea sourced media say, hey, we're still confident we just might still do it, and then everybody else is saying that, oh, he's just going to sign a new contract, and we move on with our lives. We still supposedly have room in the budget. So if we're spending, say we're spending 60 million, 70 million on Morata, we spent 30 on Rudiger, and we spent 40 plus on Bakayoko. We're still under 150 million pounds, and the budget is supposedly 200 million pounds. So that leaves plenty of space for at least one wing back, possibly two. Ryan Bertrand, as a couple people have been mentioning in the comments, is a name that keeps coming up. As before, I think Ryan Bertrand likes to come up as a name because, well, I guess he is an England international at this point, but he is homegrown, and that's and he's English. For some people, that matters still in the English Premier League as it's marketed around the world. Nowadays there's not. It's more just a worldwide Premier League, really, the global Premier League. You forgot the new goalkeeper in the budget, says Rafi. Hell, he was free. Willy Caballero, he's so good he didn't need him a transfer fee. He just came to have a good time. Are we in need of getting homegrown players? Cahill is the only first team English player. So yeah, Cahill is the only English player. Victor Moses counts as homegrown, and so does Cesc Fabregas. So we do have 3 homegrown players. The trouble with homegrown is it's the quota that we're worried about is the non-homegrown, right? So there are 17 squad places for non-homegrown players. I think at this point we're right underneath it or right at it. Morata obviously will count as non-homegrown. So that's where somebody like Ryan Bertrand and even somebody like Ross Barkley, with whom we just got linked within the last day or so, rather vaguely. But players like them, they carry not only an increased transfer fee, but become attractive for teams at the top half of the Premier League because they have essentially free squad spots for homegrown players. And obviously people like Barkley and Bertrand count as homegrown. But so do players like Lewis Baker. So, maybe we can give a squad spot to Lewis Baker. And Charlie Musonda, that's right, James, Charlie Musonda. I think we can assume that Musonda is going to be in the squad at this point, unless for whatever reason we end up signing another winger, which we really shouldn't. Can Morata do it on a cold, rainy night at the Hawthorns? Well, we're about to find out, I suppose. I couldn't possibly tell you. He has a really good strike rate in Spain. Not as much of a good strike rate in Italy, but of course he's never been a featured center forward at any of his teams. His 2 teams that he's played for, with Real Madrid and Juventus. He has scored almost 60 goals in total for them over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's not bad, but yeah, he's never played at the Hawthorns. And we all know how annoying it is to play at the Hawthorns. So we'll find out. We'll find out if the babyface assassin here can do it. His highlights look good. That's I think that's what most of us are familiar with. But of course, everybody looks good on his highlights. Somebody made the comment that Morata is as good of a dribbler as Costa thinks he is. And Morata certainly seems like a very complete striker, even at just 24. And we don't mean complete in the sense that Lukaku liked to use complete like 3 years ago. Morata actually looks like a player who can score any which way he wants. He can run with the ball. He's quick. He's got strength. He's got height. I think he could prove an astute signing. And a good omen, if you're a believer in omens, is he was signed he's not really signed yet, but we agreed his transfer on the exact same day that we signed Didier Drogba in 2004. So how is that for you? July 19th is Didier Drogba Day and possibly Álvaro Morata Day. Of course, if you believe in bad omens, the last time we spent 50 million plus on a Spanish striker with an Italian manager, said manager was sacked within 6 months, and we were stuck with Fernando Torres for a while. So there you go. Pick your omen if you'd like to be positive or negative. Anyway, speaking of Conte, it's a decent segue into Antonio Conte finally signing his new contract that's been rumored since about January, which apparently makes him the highest paid head coach, manager, whatever you want to call it, in Chelsea history, at £9.6 million per year. Not bad for a football manager. So that's nice. That's fantastic, actually. Really, not only we made him highest paid manager of all time, we gave him 2 new staff members over the last couple of weeks. This analyst called Davide Mazzotta and a new first team coach called Paolo Vanoli. Both of whom he's worked with before. Obviously, Conte likes to work with the same crew as most other managers. The trouble is really if we look at one detail of the contract, and that is that it's only for 2 years, the new contract, and his old contract was also only for 2 years. So he signed a new contract, but it's not an extension. Usually in football, when we talk about new contracts, it's assumed that there are more years on it too than the previous deal. This one, there isn't. It's the same length as his previous deal for a lot more money and possibly other benefits that nobody's talked about yet. But I guess it keeps everybody's options open. It keeps both players, both club and coach honest in their intentions, insofar as commitments and things like that. Torres wasn't 50 million; he was 49.7, so we're safe. Oh, thanks. Then we should only believe the good omen. Okay, good. Of course, as the other question goes, should Morata wear number 9? As the number 9 shirt has been vacant for quite some time. And Morata did wear number 9 at Juventus. So my money is that on him wearing number 9 and exercising those demons and restoring the glory of the number 9 to pre Chris Sutton days, or certainly pre Fernando Torres days. That's my belief. Of course, maybe he'll wear 19. Take that, Diego Costa. Please go for Sanchez and Aubameyang, and we are done for now. Well, I think Aubameyang is off the market. At least Dortmund have insisted that there is no more market for Aubameyang. Alexis, who knows? That's the same situation as before, where we are monitoring the situation and believe that possibly Arsenal could be swayed into selling. It's either us or City if he goes anywhere, so possibly something to keep in mind. Yes, Morata wears 7 for Spain. I want to say he wore 7 for Real Madrid, but I'm making that up right now as I sit here. I don't think he wore 9 though, so who knows? Maybe he's not really committed to any number whatsoever, and then we'll just give him something that's vacant. Or maybe 21 from Matic, says Georgi Draganov. Good name. Possible 3-5-2 next season, Michy partnering Morata. That's certainly an option. I think Michy has, ever since his arrival, has struck us as somebody... Oh, he was 21 for Real Madrid. Perfect. Michy's already struck us as somebody who would work best in a 2-striker setup. And if we recall way back at the beginning of last season, when he set up Diego Costa's goal, helped him get the winner against. I don't really remember anymore. The first game, again, pretty much the first game for Conte in the Premier League, when Costa, I think it was West Ham, Costa scored a late winner. It came off of a header that was won by Batshuayi. So he's always looked like a player who would play best in a two-striker setup. So 3-5-2 with Morata and Batshuayi up top, and possibly somebody like Hazard or Fabregas as de facto number 10, or as part of the three-man midfield. That's certainly an option that we could explore, or have Morata and Hazard playing together up top. I'm not sure it's something that Conte will try right away. Certainly, based on the first preseason game we watched, or we didn't watch, but we saw highlights of against Fulham. It was a pretty strict 3-4-3 when the first team was out there, with Willian and Pedro as the inside forwards, and Batshuayi as the center forward lone striker. So yeah, I don't know. 3-5-2. It's Conte has shown a good quickness, I guess. Maybe quickness is not decisiveness in switching his tactical systems around at the start of last season. But once he found the winning formula with the 3-4-3, he kind of stuck with that. Even when, for example, we didn't have a center forward and we played Willian, Hazard, and Pedro as the front three. So I think, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Conte certainly showed strong decisiveness in fixing it when it was broken, but I think we're under the assumption that it's not broken at the moment. Sky reported that we're going to sign another striker, probably Llorente, which makes no sense. Yeah, if we're signing another striker, my guess would be somebody like Llorente, and I'm not sure what that would mean for Batshuayi, unless we truly are going with a two-striker formation, in which case we do need three strikers on the team. If we're sticking with a 3-4-3, then three strikers for one position is overload, and Batshuayi is not going to get the amount of minutes he needs, at which point he would go out on loan, which would be a little sad, because over the last month and a half, when it looked like Batshuayi is going to be our only striker, I kind of grew to like the idea of him sticking around. If nothing else, he's amazing at Twitter. And we need somebody to be. Although I guess Bakayoko can be our new Twitter hero if Michi goes out on loan. We have Boga for third choice striker over Batshuayi and Morata, says Rupesh. It's interesting. There has really not been any rumblings that I've seen of Jeremy Boga going on loan. I think it's assumed that he's going to go on loan just because he had a pretty bad season last year with wherever he was at in Spain somewhere, and he needs he needs minutes, as the usual conundrum with the youth players. Him just sitting on the bench is probably not going to do him any good. So I would assume Boga's going on loan, but maybe he's going to impress in the preseason here and score lots of goals. Llorente, cheap third option, and I think that's where certainly where Llorente comes in. Incidentally, Juventus 3 years ago, their two of their center forwards were Llorente and Morata, and we have a good chance of reuniting that duo. And the side benefit of signing Llorente would be increased minutes for Tammy Abraham at Swansea City. In case you haven't seen, Tammy already scored his first goal for Swansea, although it was just a preseason goal. It took him about 20 minutes, so hopefully that's a trend to watch for this season. I think Boga will go to Hull City. Yeah, I could see that. Hull City have the Abramovich friend Leonid Slutsky, as the new head coach, and he certainly has repeatedly said that he will not shy away from getting in as many Chelsea loanies as he possibly can. So possibly Boga could end up there. I could see that. We get Morata for many years to come, so you think Abraham can replace him in the near future if we only play one striker? And your name scrolled out of the list, but that was the question. Yeah, I mean, that's I suppose that's the only negative of signing somebody like Morata, who's 24 years old and thus about to hit his prime, assuming. So then theoretically we could have 3 strikers all entering in the, early to mid 20s with Morata, Batshuayi, and Abraham next season. If we do go to a 2-striker system, or at least play at 2 strikers at regular intervals, that's a pretty good looking trio of strikers. Getting somebody like Llorente in for a year or two, just as a stopgap, is not bad. And certainly, I think that's a pretty nice option. So I'm not entirely concerned. It's tough to plan for Abraham becoming a featured Chelsea striker when we need to win now, right? Certainly, we could have tried to given him the job, but that's amazingly bold and only really feasible at some place like Swansea, or if we decide to not fire the coach regardless of results. So, in that sense, we had to have a signing like Morata instead of keeping Abraham around. For the future, I think Morata and Abraham going forward, with or without Batshuayi, could be a striker partnership that could serve us well for a really long time. And that's assuming Abraham makes the step up to the Premier League. He's proven at championship level. He's obviously proven at youth level. But we've seen many players falter at this stage, and this is not an easy step. And even if he scores goals for Swansea, as we saw with Lukaku, the step from there to Chelsea is also not easy, and possibly even harder. So, exactly as I don't know how to say your name, but Tammy Abraham has possibly as much chance of turning out another Patrick Bamford as he is to be another Romelu Lukaku. So, it's easy to get carried away with the promise and the hype, but it doesn't always work out. So, is there a buyback on Morata? Is the question. I believe there is no buyback on Morata. In fact, Morata himself has already said that going back to Real Madrid a third time is not something he would consider. Certainly not at the moment. But it didn't seem likely at all that he would consider it in the future, and that's despite being pretty sad. Just judging by the videos or whatever, pretty sad to leave his boyhood club, really the club that he's supported since age whenever, and had the 2 players that he looked up to while he was growing up, namely Raúl and Fernando Morientes. If you've seen, or if you've been around the internet the last day, you probably will have seen a link to a video, a 50-minute documentary that Real Madrid put out on Morata. If you do have 50 minutes, it is a very nice program, very nice video of Morata. Obviously, that was done. I think it was done last season, or after he returned from Juventus. So it certainly at the beginning has a little bit of a Madrid bias, but there's little denying that Morata is a Real Madrid fan, I guess you could say it. It doesn't. He said he's always going to root for Real Madrid unless they're playing Chelsea at this point. But just like with Juventus, he's going to pour his heart and soul into his new club. So I don't think there's any real worries there. Can Morata bring wingers into play is the question. From what I've seen, he certainly can. he has what you would call a pretty good first touch, which is probably not something that Lukaku will get accused of anytime soon. He can do the classic hold-up, or he can run a counter. He can dribble players. He can make the good pass. He can be on the end of headers. I think I'm not going to claim to be an expert on Álvaro Morata, but even going just beyond the fact that Real Madrid were willing to spend 30 million on him to bring him back from Juventus to be the backup to their Benzema, and now Chelsea are spending about twice as much on him to make him our featured center forward. Spanish international, and not just for a couple games. Played for two of the best and biggest teams in the world. So just based on those, his CV is basically impeccable. The only thing missing is consistent starts. So his statistics are really good for a substitute. Now he has to make that step up to be a first choice striker for a top team. But that's no different than from what Lukaku has to do at Manchester United, which Mourinho actually talked about just the other day. Lukaku has proven to be a good starter for a mid-table team, or Everton, 7th place. But now he has to prove to be a great player for a team that wants to be the best in the world. And Morata will have to do the same. Somebody like Belotti would have to do the same too if he ever goes to a top team. Why are the board spending time on Alexandro again after a Bonucci sale? Juventus are not going to sell both of their top two defenders, are they? To answer the second question, I would assume not, and I'm not sure we actually are spending that much time on it. All the narrative really just says that we're continuing to monitor it, and as long as Sandro doesn't sign his new contract, the situation doesn't really change. So there's really only two outcomes here: is one, he comes to Chelsea, or two, he signs his contract. And for most of the summer so far, one, the first choice was seemed like the more likely choice, even though it would cost us 70 million euros. Which is outrageous, really, although wingback is really important in a 3-4-3. But now it looks like the second choice is the more likely, in that he's going to sign a new and improved contract at Juventus. But until he does that, I think we're going to keep half an eye on it. And our priority should be, at this point, the right wingback, because of the Danilo situation. If that doesn't work out, then we need to find a new option to rotate or play instead of Moses. Do you know anything about when Bakayoko and Hazard will recover from injury? So they're both back at Cobham right now, training on their own. Bakayoko should be back by the end of August. There's Chelsea's worst case, from what was reported. Worst case expectation is that he will miss the first 3 games and be back by September. Of course, that might change now that we have him at the team and can really properly assess him and see how his recovery is going. Hazard is probably a bit longer. I would guess he just started running last week, so it's probably a couple months before he's back, which would put him middle to end of September. The only good thing there is that it was a bone fracture / break for Hazard, and those should heal a lot better and a lot more definitively, I guess is not really the word I'm looking for, but then it should heal better than a ligament. So like a chance of a recurring injury should be, smaller than, say, a hamstring or even a knee. But, he has to make a full recovery before he can play. And that might not be for another 2 months, unfortunately. On the plus side, the only positive really is it might give a bit more time for Musonda to play. He obviously would not play in... Or obviously, I'd say right now, he would not play or start against likes of Arsenal or City or Spurs, but we'll have a League Cup game, and we'll see who we get drawn against in the Champions League. So I think injury creates a bit of opportunity there. Not finding crazy that Hazard gets lumps kicked out of him in games and then gets injured in training. Yeah, and apparently he literally just got injured on his own. He was going to go take a kick, and somehow he stepped wrong or something happened and broke his ankle. How does that happen? If you step wrong and break your ankle, I understand like an impact, somebody tackles you and you break your ankle. Who knows? Who knows? Technically, we bought Morata for Oscar. Yeah, at 60 million for Oscar and at least 60 million for Morata. That's we had been wondering where the Oscar millions will go to. And it turns out it goes to a new center forward. It should be a pretty good investment, as long as Morata doesn't starting fights like Oscar in China. Got banned for a long time for that. I think 8 games, I want to say. But yeah, possibly Oscar's not exactly having the time of his life, but he is getting paid a lot, so whatever. Money doesn't buy you happiness, right? It certainly doesn't hurt. What do you think the midfield will look like? Matic too slow. Well, I think Matic is on his way out. The only question it really is where he's going to end up. And Juventus seems to be a possible option. And even though we might be pissed off about Alexandro, maybe we should not let that affect our thinking, or possibly as a sign of goodwill, we can give him Matic. The problem is it's Juventus are trying to pushing their luck a little bit and asking us to lower the 45 million euro asking price, and so far Chelsea are not budging. In a way, just like with Costa, we don't really have any pressure to sell Matic. We obviously have a replacement for him, even if he's not going to play right away in Bakayoko. Matic training alone by himself since the start of preseason is pretty strong indication that we're now counting on him to be in the squad next season or this season. So for his own sake and for his buyer's sake, he needs to figure out a deal. Still, I maintain that it's better to lower our price and sell to Juventus or even Inter Milan or whoever than it is to sell to Manchester United. Whatever you might think of Matic, he would probably improve United as, if nothing else, a better Fellaini. So, it's don't strengthen our opponents. We don't need to be in that position where we're desperate and we have to sell to our rivals. We must get 40 million for Costa, says Mamoun. I don't know. Do we? I know we like to balance the books and all that, but I'm presuming if we were okay with finally spending something more than 35 million on Morata, in fact, that's a new record transfer, regardless of what the final price ends up being. I'm assuming we're okay, or we have something lined up where we will comply with FFP. We don't need to sell and we can afford to buy Morata outright, or we have a move lined up for Costa or Matic to help finance it or whatever. Or as others said, Oscar already financed it. I don't know. Obviously I don't have access to the books, but Carrasco was linked a few days ago in The Sun. Is he needed? I'd say no, he's not needed, and you should not read The Sun. Certainly not their transfer rumor section or any other section. But hey, if we sell Matic, we don't have enough depth at DM considering we play with 2. True, but I don't know. It's a bit tough for me to see a way back for Matic, even if he does want to play or does want to stay. And certainly there are plenty of rumors of him wanting to leave, and there is a possibility that the whole Matic situation isn't necessarily of our own making. unlike the Costa situation. We flat out told Costa that he's not needed. And whether that was meant to be public, probably not. It is public now, but regardless, Conte did send him a text, and nobody's denied that. So I think it's assumed we don't want Costa in the team for whatever reason. I think we probably wanted Matic to stay, just like last summer. And the reason he's training alone has more to do with him wanting to leave for whatever reason than for us or for Chelsea making him leave. And yeah, he should be respected, but Conte doesn't seem to be one to take too many prisoners. If Matic wants to leave, and apparently he's made it clear enough that we sequestered him and quarantined him and made him train alone, there's only so much respect we can do, right? And now the only respect that matters at this point is getting our asking price for Matic. That's just how it is. At the end of the day, it's a business, right? We are in the Champions League. We cover at wingbacks, midfield, and wings. One injury and it all goes to hell. That is true. The only problem is it's really tough, especially these days, to plan for injuries with top-level replacements. Basically, no top-level player wants to be a bench player and play for or wait for an opportunity due to somebody else's injury. So by definition, if somebody does get injured, we have to the replacement is going to be of a lower quality, at least in the coach's estimation. That said, obviously there's a difference between a good replacement and a bad replacement. Right now, our depth at midfield certainly seems to be lacking. Mostly because we don't know what the fate of Lewis Baker is. Actually, mostly because Chalobah decided to leave, and I'm pretty sure our plan was to extend Chalobah and keep him around as the fourth or third or backup to essentially Conte. If we, I would bet Chelsea's plan was to have Conte, Bakayoko, Fabregas, and Chalobah as the midfield four. Chalobah, of course, had different plans, so that's unfortunate, and now we have to figure out who is at least of his level to be the next depth. And as you're saying, with the Champions League coming up, we possibly need somebody of a higher level than Chalobah. I'm not sure if Lewis Baker is that person. They're not really the same type of player. But obviously Lewis Baker is a tremendous young player and probably somebody who has a really, really great future ahead of him. Whether that future is best served by keeping him at Chelsea or sending him out on loan, well, again, that's your usual dilemma, right? What do you do? There's no good choices or no bad choices until you actually make them and see what happens. David Luiz can play defensive midfield. Yes, he can. Can anybody else play David Luiz's position in defense? Christensen, maybe? That's certainly the position he played at Gladbach often, the center of the back three. So, yeah. I think David Luiz could make a defensive midfielder in a pinch. Good for us that Conte equals 2. Yes, I think we're already counting on that. One of the reasons I think the 3-4-3 worked so well is basically it was a 3-5-3 with Conte, making a midfield 3 by himself and Matic or Fabregas or whoever. So, which audiobook did you go with or will you go with? Asked Jamie. For those who don't know, in about 8 hours, I will be heading up on a road trip up the west coast of the United States, up to Seattle for a weekend, and I have to go to a cousin's wedding. So that's about a 13-hour drive, and that means I get to listen to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks. I have not made a decision on audiobook yet, although somebody suggested Thomas Pynchon. I don't know how to say his name. The guy who wrote Gravity's Rainbow, which is a really good book you should read if you haven't read it. One of his earlier works I've never read is, I forget the name, has a 49 in it. That might be it. Back to football. Morata deal is the bumper deal this season. Yes, it is. Morata is the marquee signing and the biggest signing Chelsea have ever made. And certainly, at least in absolute terms. There was a graphic going around where you can adjust. Obviously, there's inflation in everyday life, and there is amazing inflation in football, just because of the tremendous monies involved in TV broadcast rights and things like that. As we see, just this season, 40 million is the new 30 million, where 30 million was the new 20 million. It's kind of like that Jay-Z song, except the other way around. Or no, the right way around. Anyway, so 40 million is the standard price now for just about any player. Obviously, when 5 years ago, 20 million was the standard price for any player. When we bought, for example, Michael Essien for 32 or 30 something, mid 30s, that was one of it was a tremendously high transfer fee at the time. Or in 2004, when Chelsea bought people like Ricardo Carvalho and Paulo Ferreira and Didier Drogba for around 20 million each. I forget the exact numbers. Those were seen as outrageous prices for players. And there's a methodology that's advocated by, I forget the dude's name, but he's a Liverpool fan. His methodology is to look at each summer. You look at all the transfers that were made, and you kind of base your inflation rate off of the average transfer that was made during that season. Instead of percentage of revenue, which is another way to look at transfers, or percentage of turnover, things like that, he's looking at the relative transfer fee to just that season. And if you look at that, somebody like Shevchenko in today's money would be 130 million pounds, and that would be something like 135 million pounds would be if we bought Shevchenko today, using the relative amounts that we paid back in whenever that was, we would have paid 134 million pounds for him, which is pretty outrageous considering how Shevchenko was not worth 134 million pounds. He was not terrible, but he certainly wasn't good, good. It'd be pretty generous to call Shevchenko's time at Chelsea good, even though I really liked Shevchenko when he was at Madrid. To be honest, Morata is one of the best signings in Chelsea's history. I might be a little too early for that, but at 24 years old, he certainly has time and plenty of obvious skill to make a legendary impact in the SW6. Neymar's 222 million can't be beaten if it's true. Yeah, that would be pretty outrageous. And I haven't really kept up with this because it's been Morata for the last 24 hours. But 222 million would be pretty outrageous. And the only way I could see that working is just from the financial perspective, to pass, regulation and stuff like that, is if Verratti goes the other way and they somehow, do some underhanded deal and they cancel out the amounts or whatever. There's no way PSG can afford to drop 200 million on one player and then still pass regulations and be allowed to play in, or field a team in the Champions League. But hey, maybe we're giving FFP too much credit, and it doesn't. Nobody really cares except us. Juan Garcia, yes, Morata could bugger off and we could get Lord Bentner. Yeah, that would be a bad idea. Very bad. It's painful we never got to sign Danilo. Well, it kind of is, but then maybe it isn't. We'll see who we end up with that right back. I think the jury's still out on the Danilo transfer. Is it true that Verratti's new agent is Mino Raiola? That is true, as far as I know. He switched agents from Domenico Di Campoli, The only reason I know his name is because he used to talk about Chelsea a little bit when we were kind of sort of linked with Verratti. His agent is now agent to the stars, Mino Raiola, possibly the most annoying agent out there. Although maybe he could have a annoying agent off with Jorge Mendes and see who is more of a scourge on the game. Muller to Chelsea. Bayern Munich's Muller? When did that happen? It's why would they want to sell? I haven't heard that one. So that's interesting. But does he play right wing back? I mean, I know Thomas Muller is a pretty unique player, or used to be a pretty unique player before he seemingly fell off a bit. But we kind of need a wing back, not another attacker at the moment. Yes, there's Serge Aurier from PSG, who could be available for 20 to 25 million. And yeah, he certainly is a quality player. There are questions about some of his off-field behavior, but maybe we have the structures in place to keep that under control. What about enforcing our wingback? Are we going after a Mendy? I'm not sure. I don't think we're going after Mendy, and I think a lot of that is just reading a bit too much into social media. But you know, maybe we could. If we're assuming that Manchester City gazumped us on Danilo, then maybe we can repay the favor and go after Benjamin Mendy. That could certainly be an interesting signing. Although I maintain that we need a right back much more than we need a left back. But maybe I like Alonso because he's got a beautiful face. Will Morata deliver? We'll see. There's every sign, every indication that he will. He's playing for a coach that he loves, and we're ready to make him our featured center forward, much to Michy Batshuayi's chagrin. But them's the strokes, Michy. That's right, left wing back covered with Alonso and Kennedy. Kennedy is the future. If you say it with enough conviction, maybe it will come true. Alexandro, no update on Alexandro. What difference can Morata bring to the team compared to Diego and the tactical changes we can do now that he's our number one striker? I wish I could. I'm not sure I am that familiar with Morata to speak with any real authority. From what I've seen, Morata is somebody who can do everything Diego does. Possibly, maybe not be as much of a bully, and certainly not engage in as much of the the mind games and the antics and all that nonsense. But again, maybe that's something that we're not familiar with because we don't watch him that closely. But from what I've seen, Morata is a fairly well-rounded center forward, which lends him plenty of versatility to play as a single, center forward in a 3-4-3 or play in a 3-5-2 as alongside, say, a Batshuayi or even a Hazard. And that's not necessarily something we could really say about Costa. Costa was a very good, or is a very good lone center forward. He can occupy two defenders, whether through skill or will or subterfuge or whatever. But I think I'm not sure Morata will immediately get us to change our tactics. He certainly fits into the current tactics, but he could possibly get us to explore a 3-5-2. After all, 3-5-2 is what Juventus played a lot with Morata as one of the center forwards. So it's good to have options, right? So I think he will help there. He's good in the air. He's good with his feet. That's what more can you ask for? He's a good finisher. He can link up well. He's quick. He's strong. Really. The more you watch Morata, at least for me, the more I've seen him over the last 24 hours or whatever, I really started to look for things that he's done. the more impressive he gets. So it kind of makes you wonder how he wasn't the starting center forward for his previous teams, but of course he was stuck at Real Madrid behind Benzema, and at Juventus they were doing a bit of rotation type of deal. So, I think Morata has all the tools, as they say in baseball. 5 tools, all the tools needed to be a truly excellent center forward, and that's my firm belief, as I've come to over the last 12 hours. Apparently, he has just landed in London, so raise the roof and all that, and it's gonna have his medical. Morata can play on the wing, so how about Morata, Batshuayi, Pedro till Hazard comes back? Yeah, it could be an option, I guess. It does speak to his versatility, but I think I think we're gonna stick with the 3-4-3 until it breaks, and start with Willian and Pedro, and play Morata as the center forward. Even if Baker and Musonda do well in preseason, it would be wise to rely on them as squad players given the schedule of Premier League from December to March. I think if they do well in preseason and we keep them in the squad, I think that's a great decision. Just because, if for nothing else, it'd be nice. It'd be really nice to have a youth player finally make that step. And I am a big believer in Lewis Baker. So, Musonda, whatever. Dime a dozen those tricky little wingers. But Lewis Baker, man. Both feet. Smart, skills, vision. Lewis Baker is going to be amazing one day. And hopefully that's at Chelsea. I think he'll be with the team for the game on Saturday. That's Jamie. Morata, I think it's going to be a close call, and if he makes it, I think it's just going to be to show up. I think we were talking earlier a little bit about, he just landed in London, so he has his medical today. Presumably he passes, signs the contract, poses with the shirt, shakes a hand, does a stupid video, and even if he flies out today or whatever, he would, get there just about on time, with the game kicking off at noon London time on Saturday. So, obviously Morata has been training with Real Madrid and preparing for the season already, so he's not starting from scratch, unlike somebody like Bakayoko who had been injured. So he needs a fair bit of time to get started. Morata is already in the middle of his preparation, so I think as soon as he shows up, he can just continue with that. But I would be surprised if he started, or even if he played against Arsenal. But be a nice surprise, and certainly I hope to see him at least sitting on the bench and getting introduced to his new teammates and his new fans. So that would be cool. All right, let's do a quick rundown, actually, of the 25 players currently in the squad, and then I think we're gonna have to call it a stream. So in random order, which is the order that they were lined up in the team picture that was on the plane, a team picture from which Cesar Azpilicueta and Gary Cahill were missing, and they were like sitting off to the side. Who knows what they were doing? Possibly picking out their captain's armbands, as I'm assuming Cahill is going to be the captain and Azpilicueta is going to be our vice captain for this season. But the 25 players who are in the squad are, from left to right on that picture, is Tomáš Kalas, young Czech Republic defender. He's apparently, there's actually a story out of the Czech Republic that he signed a new contract and will possibly go on loan back to Fulham. We'll see. But the contract is pretty solid information, so that's interesting. He's the next one after Piazon and Van Hinkel to sign a new contract at 24 or whatever, and then head back out on loan. But it is what it is. The hero Anfield, he's still with us. Eduardo, the third choice goalkeeper, young Jake Clark-Salter, who probably will go out on loan eventually. Batshuayi, Conte, Caballero, David Luiz, Then we have a guy called Marcin Bulka, who is from Poland. He's about 2 meters tall. He is one of the biggest men I've ever seen in a football shirt. He's our 4th goalkeeper at the moment, and chances are he's going to be our 3rd goalkeeper for the Champions League, because we don't want to register 3 non-homegrown goalkeepers for the Champions League. So he's probably taking Eduardo's spot for the Champions League squads. Marcin Bulka, remember the name. Young American midfielder Kyle Scott, Thibaut Courtois, Kennedy, Pedro, Fabregas, Willian, Remy. There's a race for Remy's signature these days, with teams from England such as Everton and Southampton, teams from France like Lille and Marseille, and apparently Lazio as well, all hoping to sign this amazing 30-year-old backup striker who's constantly injured. So good luck to them. But for now, Remy is still with Chelsea and China. There's also Marcus Alonso, Andreas Christensen, Victor Moses, Lewis Baker, Charlie Musonda, Mario Pasalic, who's a possible candidate for sticking around. Although there is a story just the last couple hours that Pasalic has agreed, or has the choice to agree to a loan to Spartak Moscow after signing a new contract, of course. So that's something to keep an eye on. And the last 2 players are Fikayo Tomori, the young defender who was the backup right wing back in the friendly against Fulham. So that's possibly a role for him to watch. And Jeremy Boga, about whom we've talked already. So that's your 25-man touring roster. Antonio Rudiger will join in Singapore next week. He will make 26, and Morata hopefully will join in the next couple of days to make 27. And then a couple others will leave. Kurt Zuma, somebody mentions Kurt Zuma. Kurt Zuma is in Stoke already, although that move has not been confirmed yet. He was already pictured in Stoke, going presumably for his medical. So, old Kurt Zuma, no Kurt Zuma at Chelsea this season. He's going to be at Stoke City. And I think on that note, we're going to call it a day. Been in for an hour. If you watched any part of this, or however long you watched it, I do thank you. We will be back hopefully after the Arsenal game on Saturday. We'll probably do a brief little review of that friendly at the Bird's Nest in Beijing. See how that goes. We'll be see if we'll be another 8-2 after the Fulham friendly. Probably not, but and it certainly won't be. Even if we win, it won't be a revenge for the FA Cup final. But it will be finally we'll get to watch Chelsea in action again after a couple months away. So that'll be exciting. We'll talk to you after that. Thanks for watching, and let's get excited. Let's get hyped, because we have Conte on a new contract, and we have Morata now. So who's going to stop us now, right?